During my sleeveless top pattern to test a new fit. So we designed the pattern in December, and we use the back. We have 4 inches wide and 1 inch deep for the back, and the front we did 4 inches wide and 5 inches deep. In this revision, because that one, the neckline was a little bit bland, we wanted to make it a little bit more interesting and improve the neckline because it was a little bit big. We did the back 3 inches wide, 0.5 inches deep, and the front we did it 3 inches wide and 3 inches deep, and we have a keyhole that is 0.5 inches wide because this top that I'm wearing, the keyhole is a little bit big because we did it 1 inches wide where it's connecting with the front neckline curve, and I think it's a little bit wide. So for pattern 2, I learned from this one and did 0.5 inches wide, and I did 2 inches deep. So let's see how this one work for us. So we are pretty much taking a look at my measurement that I'm using to design the pattern and the neckline that I'm going to use, as well as, you know, the circumferences and the length from the high shoulder to the hip. And I'm pointing at the length for the hip. So from the high shoulder to the hip, and I'm using 27 inches long because I want it to be well down that I can tuck it in, and I want it to be, you know, raw past my bum. So that is the highest area of my hip. And pretty much designing the pattern, looking at the measurement, and right now I'm working on the shoulder drop. And the way I like to determine the shoulder drop is from the mid section of the waist at the back to the shoulder drop, and for my case is 15 inches long. So by drawing that to connect from waist, center waist, back on the pattern to like the center back from the waist section to touch the vertical line that came from the shoulder line from the top touching the upper bust, I will determine the shoulder drop there, and it could be about 2.5 inches drop from the shoulder line after I draw that vertical, that oblique line. So now I'm connecting the end of the back pattern, and I like to have my waist 0.5 inches less than my full bust so that I can cinch it in at the waist. And I have my waist is high, and I have a belly, so I like to put my belly measurement on the pattern as well. And being a pear shape, from the waist down is going to be oblique as well, like a triangle, design a type of triangle. So now we are working on the armhole for the back, and I did 0.5 inches inward halfway for the from that shoulder drop to the upper bust. Halfway I measure 0.25 inches inward and went straight from the shoulder drop there, and then curve it to the upper bust. For sleeveless top, I like to have my armhole at the upper bust. And for the long sleeve, I found that having the armhole to the full bust make it flexible for the sleeve. And that is a design of our pattern 2, having all those lines, and we have the waist, and then we have the belly, which is 19 inches from the shoulder down. And then we are going to now work on the front pattern. And once you design the back pattern, you might remember some numbers, and I like to design pretty much the front and the back about the same when it comes to the length and the width of the pattern. So here we have our back pattern, and I added 0.5 inches seam allowances at the shoulder seam, and that is the only place I added seam allowances. I build the seam allowances into the other areas. So I have 1 inch ease on each quarter of pattern, that pattern, and 0.5 inches seam allowances built into it. So that make it 1.5 inches that are built into those circumferences, quarter circumferences are added to those quarter circumferences, because that pattern is a quarter, is half the back, therefore is the full circumference is divided by 4. And then I added 1 inch is 0.5 inch seam allowances. So that 1 inch is will make a 4 inches is for the whole outfit. 2 inches is at the back, 2 inches is at the front. So now we are looking at the front pattern. For that indentation in the armhole, I did 0.75 inches inward, again halfway on that shoulder seam from the drop to the upper bust area. And again, I cinch it in at the waist 0.5 inches less than the full bust. Alternatively, I can calculate 1/4 of the waist plus 1.5 ease and seam, and then subtract it from the bust, and the difference divided by 2 added to the waist, and it will come about close because of my rectangular shape as well. And pear-shaped flats at the chest and curvy at the hip. So I'm not trying to hide my hip. I'm trying to draw attention to my neck and my hip. So therefore, I tend to draw my design to be a little bit outward from the waist down. So here, now that we cut those pieces, I'm connecting them to see if I need to make some adjustment. So we are looking at the front that is a little bit wider than the back. What I did in the past is I will just, when I'm sewing, I will pinch in, I'll make a little bit of pleat at the on the side that is a little bit wider. It's like a dot, but not really a dot. I'll just make a pleat so that I can, in midpoint of the sleeve, the seam, the shoulder seam that is wider, and then sew everything. Here though, I'm trying to adjust the neckline so that it can flow better, and I think it is a good approach. At least at that moment that I was doing it, I thought it was a good one. So and just making those adjustments, and I noticed that on pattern 1 I didn't do it, and it made a little bit up on the shoulder seam there. So curving it better so that that high area is a little bit down, I think is a good idea. And I think the issue that the reason why I have that is that 0.5 inch seam allowances that I add at the shoulder seam. I think when I add it, I don't curve the neckline well. So I need to make that adjustment. Now that I'm putting them together, the armhole match well. And this one, this arm, it match well as well. The neckline area. So that is something I think we should be looking for. And I still have an excess there. and that excess I can just play in when I'm sewing. And now we can pretty much take a look at the the shape of the pattern. Again, it's not going to have dots. Is dotless sleeveless top pattern that we are working on and sewing it with a cotton fabric. So once we are able to draft it well, we like it, that will become our go-to pattern. At my age, I'm not growing anymore like my kid. Therefore, once we get that pattern well done, we'll be able to keep using it. So I'm looking for a fabric that I can use for it. And again, when I like a fabric, I don't really like to use it when I'm creating those samples. But my endless sample trials, I still need to use those fabrics that I like because those samples are what I'm wearing. So yeah, I tend to I will like a fabric, but then at the same time I will say, well, if it does not turn out good, the pattern, after I sew, if it does not turn out good, and I like that fabric, so maybe I should use the fabric that is that I don't care much for, and but then those things does turn out to be okay, and turn out to be what I'm wearing, so I must well sew them in the fabric that I like, right? At least I keep telling myself that, but then I keep, you know, shying away from those. So I like that aqua fabric, but because I like it so much, I'm drawn to it. I want it not to use it for the pattern, and then it will not work. So I'm trying to think there to see what I'm going to use. And if it works, then I can go to a fabric that I like. So pulling that sun color, I'm trying to see what will go with it because I want to contrast the color, the binding. Even though it's a sleeveless top, I want to make it interesting. So making the binder to binding to show up outside and making it in a different color will add a design to our top. And using 100% cotton, you can call it quilting cotton. It is a structured fabric, 140 GSM. It is structured, and because my top does not have that in it, I want that to flow, to drape, not being boxy. So therefore, I'm cutting the fabric in bias. It does use more fabric, but at the same time, it makes the outfit drape. At least that is my the way I view it. Cutting um, the top in bias will make it drape, in my opinion. So therefore, I made it a point to sew my top in bias. So I folded the fabric in triangle shape, just the way you see it, and put the pattern on the fold so that I don't have seam in the middle of the top or in the middle back of the top. And then you see the way I cut the other side off. I wanted to turn it into a bias strip and put it away because I'll use those bias strip for binding. And in here, I folded the side in, and I think it's because it was a little bit bigger than the fabric. The way I went outward from the hip, from the waist down, it was a little bit wider than the fabric that I was working with, and therefore I just folded that excess on the a side seam in and pin it down on the pattern. In fact, it's now what happened. The pattern, I shorten it. I folded the pattern, and again it must be longer than the fabric that I was working with. So therefore I fold it inward a little bit and just pin it. That way I will make that top shorter, and by folding in I needed to fold the side seam inward as well so that I can cut it properly. So that is just one way that if you have a long pattern but the fabric is not long, you can do it like that. And I think by doing it like that, I will have reduced it to 22 inches long, so it'll make it a little bit cropped for us. And I will still have my long pattern there. So now that we cut it front and back, the front, the neckline is not too deep, and the back, the neckline is. So this is a closer view of the fabric that we are using. And I pick a purple. One thing I like to do is I like to ask my kid, my second daughter, she's very good. In fact, though my two daughters are very good in drawing, but my second daughter is a little bit in tune with color. So I like to ask her color combination questions. So I will just bring the fabric and the remnant bundle that I have, and then I'll ask her to pick the color that will complement that fabric that I'm going to cut the pattern in. And I don't know if she's the one that point out this purple or not. It could be. So I'm using the purple, and I'll just ask them all for that fabric that is a little bit yellow and brown, what color will complement it. So we decided it's going to be this purple, and I'm just making bias banding out of them. The way I like to make my bias banding, I like to make it wide and store it, and later I can just fold it in two, iron it and cut it. So that allows me to make it quickly. And I noticed that if I don't make bias banding or bias strip from the remaining fabric right away, I don't do it. So some nice size fabric, I just put them away. That's why I have those bundles as well, or fabric that I already cut, but some of them I turn them into bias strip right away. And this, I don't recall the size that I made it, but it could have been 3.5, and I don't think it's 4. But, and again, I like to fold it in triangle and just measure and just go from there. You measure once, and then I just fold the fabric along that measurement until, and then iron it until I'm done, and then I'll cut it. So I'm having 1.25, so we made it 3.5 wide, the bind strip. So for the what we are going to do with it, we are just folding it in two and cutting some. That way the rest we can put it away at 3.5 inches wide. That gives us more option to work with later. If we want a bigger strip from it, we have it. If we want it small, we can cut it down as well, like in this example. So, and I will just guess how many of those strips I will use, and the rest I will just roll it and add it to my bias strip container. And that triangle excess, when we lay the pattern down, the excess that I cut off before I even cut the pattern off, I turn those into, because it was in a triangle shape already, I just continue it and make the bias strip out of them as well. Because it's not in a rectangle shape for me to put it away, it's in a triangle shape, I can just make those bundles and just add it to the stash. That way when I'm going to sew something and I have a complementary color there, I already have the bias strip ready to use. So now we are trying to pretty much measure the neckline to see if it can go through our head. So making a top that we do not want opening at the front or at the back, we have to get creative to make sure our neckline is wide enough to go through our head. So that's why I like to opt for keyhole at the front. It can be at the back as well, but as a design feature, I put it at the front. So we are having it there, and I measure it 2 inches deep and 0.5 inches wide at the neckline. So 0.5 inches there, so that's not too wide, and then the going down 2 inches. And you can measure your head circumference, and I think mine is 24 inches for my head. So therefore, having about 22 inches when you measure all of those is a good idea. That way you know that it can stretch being in bias too to make up for that 24. So 22 to 24 for all those curves total together is a good idea. So, and I'm trying to measure it again because pattern 1 we did 4 inches wide at the neckline, and then I did 5 inches deep at the front. So that was kind of wide, and this one I'm making it smaller. I wanted to make sure it's still wide enough. Here, now having all the sewing thread, I like to see the closest that I can use. So I'm using a type of dark blue there. It will go with the purple. So therefore, I can either use the beige for the other part of sewing of the top and use that color for the binding. And here we are working on the binding. So I'm starting it with the wrong side of the fabric, and I put the right side of the binding on it, and I'm just going to sew the keyhole first. And I want the binding to show up. So now that we sew that curve, we are going to iron it. It's good to clip it as well, at least the curvy side, so that you know when you are going to sew a second, you can sew it easily. I just don't recall if I clip it or not. And using 1.25 inches wide binds on it. I notice as I'm sewing those stuff that when I take the time to fold and iron and pin, I sew those curves better. So therefore, I will recommend that. It's working for me. It's more work, but it's making my sewing more cleaner. I'm not very good at sewing straight, and sewing those exposed stitches, taking the time to fold and iron and pin those curves is making my stitches a little bit more cleaner. So now we are done sewing it, and we can just iron it. Again, it's good to iron. It relaxes the fabric and make those things set properly for us to work with. We can just iron that and clean those and join the pattern together. You'll be able to see the shape of the curve and cut those excess strips to line up with it. So now that we are done with that curve, we are going to work on the side, the shoulder seam. putting the right side of the pattern together, we can sew on the seam, and we can see that one is wider than the other. You can either try to pull on the other to see if that will fit, but what I like to do is just guess the middle of the longer fabric and make a pleat. In some way it's a type of dot, but at the same time it's a pleat there, and I'm okay having those pleats at my shoulder. So I don't cut those excess off necessarily, just because I don't want to make it too tight later. I just make a pleat out of it. And now we sew, and I think I'm just using that brown color to sew everything. So we sew the size, the shoulder seam. Now we are going to sew the side seam as well. We can work on the binding at the neckline after the shoulder seam before we sew the side seam as well. Both options will work. You just have to see which one makes it comfortable for you to sew your neckline. If the side seam are open, is the better, is makes it easier for you, then you go that route. Since those two are not connected, yeah, you should be fine. In this case, I show my side seam, and now that I'm done with it, I'm going to zigzag them. So with this type of sewing pattern machine that I'm using, I put it on C, and then I put the numbers 1 on 1. So, and then the one where the number is the stitch length. So they're going to make the zigzag a little bit smaller, and the C is the zigzag pattern of the stitches. Even though they are cut in bias, technically they should not fray. It is a second stitches protection for the outfit. I'm sewing with cotton thread, so cotton thread can break unless unlike it's not like polyester thread, so therefore it gives another reinforcement to the outfit. Now that we zigzag it, in some way choosing that fabric is kind of good because you can see the different that sewing thread that is not for that type of fabric. It makes it easier for you to see as well, so that's a good thing. So now we can just iron those, and the shoulder seam, I like to iron it to the back so that when I'm sewing the neckline, it can stay put. What I noticed though is a little bit challenging. One thing that I noticed when I sew for my kid is I will sew over that shoulder seam, especially my son, so that it can stay put. That way I won't have to deal with it trying to move it to the right side later, because sometimes one side will be toward the front and the opposite side, like the neckline side, will be toward the back, and the shoulder side will, when I'm putting the sleeve, I'm working on the armhole side, will be toward the front for the same shoulder seam. So that I try to avoid that. So you can iron it, and if that can help. In here I'm trying to see the length that I can use, and just guess it by just putting it down to make sure it's long enough, and I just join two together. I'm not very good at joining a bias strip together, so I just like to go straight. I'll put them together and just sew them straight. So, and I wanted to have about 13 to 15 inches of bias strip hanging to be the tie. So now that we determine our length, we can start working on it. I try to find the midpoint at the back, but I don't think I'm going to start sewing it from the middle though, having that tie being the neckline as well. So I'm putting the right side against the wrong side of, I'm putting the right side of the binding strip against the wrong side of the top, and I'm measuring what will be the tie. So 13 to 15 is good. and I'm just trying to make sure I have about the same on each side of the strip. But once I determine it for one, I should be able to find do the other later as well. Okay, I'm doing 15 here. And I can just start pinning or straight sewing. It works too. And you just take your time to sew it. And I had to remember moving that shoulder seam to the back. I'm starting it from the front, from the keyhole, going to the back, and gently pulling on the fabric to make sure I don't have unwanted pleat there is important as well. So let's see here. Yeah, we did it all the way, and that joint turned out to be toward the end of the keyhole as well, but I think we should be fine. So now we can just iron everything well, and this the stitches is upward, like I'm moving toward the binding when I'm ironing. So we can iron at the back and iron at the front, at like the right side of the fabric as well. And it's good to sew your binding like that, like when you are going to expose the binding, sewing it at the front side and ending it at the front. I found that to help me sew a little bit cleaner, because I'm seeing where I'm seeing and sewing is going to be the exposed side of it. So starting on the front side, and then with the right side of the binding against the wrong side of the top, and then when you come to the right side of the fabric, you finish it there. So now I'm folding that excess, that tie mid in two lengthwise, so that I can, see the middle as each side is going to fold inward again. And using the binding should for the neckline to be the tie, I found that size to work for me. I use bigger size as well, but when you are hard to find a good balance, when you don't want your binding at the neckline to be too wide, you may not make the strip too wide either, or you can cut the excess off around the neckline when you are folding it in the way I'm doing it. But using 1.25 seems to be working here. I think 1.5 will work too, because it seems like this one is a little bit on the smaller side. So I had to pay more attention to be able to fold it properly and cover the stitch that I have on the top. And just take time to fold those like that, iron it and pin it, and take time and do it all around. Iron it for the fabric to stay put. That just help us, sew better. And if when later you look at the back, you may not sew on the binding strip clearly well at the back, but at least at the front it will be better. So that's why I prefer to sew the binding at the top, starting from the inside, the on the wrong side, and ending it at the right side where we have it. So now that we pin everything and iron, we are ironing, pinning, like when we fold we iron and then we pin, and when we're done we iron it again. So I'm just going to start sewing. I can start from the tie end, but it seems like here I started from the keyhole area and gently go all around. Because I have so many pins on it, can only sew a little bit and take the one pin out and sew again a little bit. And you have to be careful because those pins can poke. So therefore, I just go about it slowly, gently. And I think I was working on it late as well. I was finishing later in the evening with um, a lamp there. The sewing machine does not have a bulb in it. The bulb, I knocked the sewing machine at some point and the bulb just stopped working. The lamp bulb inside of it, so I need to find another one for it. It's a bulb that times to times it will stop working and times to times it will work until I knock the machine. It was on the floor and I knocked it down. So it was not that it dropped from far, but still it just stopped working. So therefore, unless I'm sewing next to a bright lit window or when it's dark, I need to use an additional lamp there. Even with that yellow lamp that came with the machine though, I still had to use um, a desk lamp next to when I'm sewing where it's not clearly lit. I don't have proper good amount of light. So now we are going to work on the armhole. We are going to use the same principle, but the things with the armhole is closed because we saw the side seam. You can leave it open and sew the armhole easily, but the problem with that is you will be sewing the binding short with the side seam later. And I think it should be fine if you lay down the binding and use a hand stitch to sew it down. But I have done it before. But again, just not to have something that will be rubbing against my skin in the armpit, I just prefer to sew the side seam and then sew a closed armhole. So by doing that though, when we start again at the back, we will fold one end of the binding down and we'll sew all around and we will sew the other end over it. That's what I did, and then I will cut that excess off. Just want to make sure they overlap well, and then I can just cut that excess piece off and iron everything outward. That is the way I do my binding. It works fine for me, so I don't worry about connecting those binding strip before I sew if it does not turn out to be the right size, so the right length. So I don't want to have to deal with it. So this approach does work well for me. I'm not saying that's the best approach, but that is the approach that worked for me. Having that opening in the binding strip to work with. And here we can just iron it more. And we can from the right side. We start from the wrong side. Now we can, you know, fold it down. We'll start with that junction, fold it down to match the seam, and then fold it to cover the seam. Iron, pin, and do it all around, because sometimes the armhole banding tend to twist on me. So I found that ironing it, pinning it, and do it all around gives me time to adjust some areas until the seam is the fold is pulled for me to sew a seam easily. And now we are done folding, ironing, and pinning. You see the way is probably said. We can just press it more and gently sew all around it, starting with that same junction. And I like to make that junction at the back, not at the front. The front is a little bit more curved than the back armhole. So I start the banding at the back and end it at the back, and I'm going to sew it like that as well. That is pretty much what I do. And I tend to start it mid back where it's not too curvy, if you see what I mean. So that is where the junction is, and I can just go all the way. You could take the bottom of the sewing machine off. If your machine comes out, mine comes out, I can take it out, but sometimes I just don't. And we just sew it all around, and we did it for both. So the neckline is done, the armhole is done. We can hem the bottom if we want, but we are using the binding as a design pattern on it, so therefore we like to add it at the back, at the bottom as well. So let's see if we add it at the bottom or if we just hem the bottom. And what do you think? That purple looks good on with that color. How would you call that color? Is it like sun? I think it's like sun color. I think that's what the fabric said. It's a little bit yellow-ish, but at the same time it's a little bit brownish. You see the cardigan that I'm wearing, that color and the color in the, so that one is what, 3.5 inches or 3.25 inches. So I'm using it like that, but anyway, so yeah, that color of the fabric, I think it just works well with that purple, don't you think? So now for the bottom, we are going to start at the back, as at the wrong side of the fabric as well. It makes sense to iron those side seam so that they can lay as well. And we can cut that triangle out of there. The way we did the armpit binding, that's the same way we are going to do that. Is enclosed hem. So therefore we are going to fold the one side or one end of the binding strip, and we put the right side of the binding strip against the wrong side of the top, and we are just going to sew it like that. And I started from the back, little bit before the side seam, but again from the back. Why? I just prefer to do it that way. And those sleeveless top, I wear them with cardigans. You see the cardigan that I'm wearing, I wear, that's just my my style, my clothing dressing style. So therefore I'm going to have a cardigan on it. The front of the top is going to show up, but the back won't show up. So putting those junctions at the back just makes sense to me. So now I overlap those two, and I'm going to pretty much cut that excess off. And we can just iron everything, moving the stitches toward the binding strip, away from the top itself. And we can turn inside out, the right side out, and iron it some more. So in this design, I made the bottom strip wide. Remember, we shortened the top because we didn't have enough of the fabric to sew with. So we made the binding to be wider, 3 inches, that we will fold in little bit. So it will give us another 1 inch or so of strip at the bottom, making that top 1 inch longer in some way as well. So we fold it in to meet the seam, the seam, if I'm even calling it right, and then we can fold it again to cover the seam, and I can just keep ironing and keep pinning. And because I cut it in a triangle shape, those side seam is now like I don't have 90-degree angle between the hem and the side seam, so it makes that area a little bit outward that I'm trying to fold in through that binding. So, but yeah, it works too. And now we iron pin everything, put, and we can just sew over it. What do you think? I think a nice touch to the top, right? Making that top kind of cropped. If you don't tuck it in, that's a nice design at the bottom. So that is, the way I'm trying to learn to design my own clothing pattern, my own work wardrobe pattern. And having a top like this, once we like the pattern, this is version 2 or the variation 1 of pattern 1, but once we like it, we can, even though we are sewing a sample here, we are taking the time to sew it to learn, improve our sewing skill as well. And remember, those samples are my wardrobe now, so I'm taking the time to sew it. And having those top like that, the pattern, we can make multiple variation of top. This top, for instance, is a variation. You can sew one without binding at the bottom, just a hem. That will be another design technically of that same pattern. And with that pattern, we can even cut the pattern. We can like fold it at the waist so that we can have the pattern to the waist, and cut a triangle, no, a circle skirt to attach it to the waist. That would be another design. So having that sleeveless top pattern, we can make multiple outfits out of it. But right now we need to get it to say we can even make book neck style as well. But right now we want to actually get this one to work for us. So what do you think about this? The sewing is not perfect. You can see that, even you can see some stitches so showing at the back, and even the front is not straight stitches. But I mean, between you and I think you and I are the only one that knows. So when we wear this and we are, about, I don't think those flaws will show up. The thread color blend in with that purple and enough. So, and here I'm just giving you a pic of the station that I use to sew it, so that if you feel like you don't have a sewing station, don't fret, you can create one. And here I just put a tote down, and I have a foldable table that I'm now using the leg, and I just put it on the tote, put a blanket on it, and put my sewing machine on it. And I was sitting on a, I don't know how you call that chair that people use outside, that has a wide arm rest, and I just sat on it and sew. So that is the final design, and that is the pattern version 2 or iteration 2 of our sleeveless top, and here I'm wearing it for us to see it. There is a little bit gap between my neck and the fabric, the neckline. You see when I turn, there is a little bit gap there, and you can, with that paint, that blue, I think they work just fine. I can wear it with that blue. I have solid, I tend to have, I'm sewing solid paint. I sew solid paint, solid color paint, and then I like to use design fabric for top to go with it, so that I can just have a minimalist wardrobe for work, and multiple top can go with one paint, for instance, or one paint can go with multiple tops. So, and there is a little bit gap at the armhole to the apex, but again, I don't think it needed that there. For a shorter quilting cotton top, what do you think? It's not bulky, right? Or boxy, right? I think it's flowy in some way, drapey in some way, right? You can see some excess at the front, but and what I'm noticing though, I think it's a little bit tight at the neckline. The tie is very close to my neck. I like things close to my neck, but I think that one is a little bit close. Again, by looking at the outfit, my attention is drawn to my neck. When I tuck it down, I tuck it in. If I have it up, the attention will be drawn to my neck, where the color, the contrasting color is, and my hip level, where the contrasting hem is as well. So diverging attention away from my small chest. Does that make sense? That's how I'm learning to design my pattern, sewing for myself, getting to know my body type, and seeing how I can sew for myself, and make things that I'm comfortable in and still be professional. So having a top like that, that is I don't know, it does not have that in it, and is fitting me well. And again, it's not perfect, it's too close to my neckline. There is a little bit gap at the back, and well, I think those are the two issues that I have with that top. So this version 2 is not the final version. We will need to do something about the neckline. So there will be a version 3. So far, I think this is better than pattern 1. Pattern 1 neckline was too wide, and pattern 2 is the neckline is too tight. Let's see if we can make pattern 3 better at the neckline. So thank you so much for watching, and here we can just take a look at the design, the how will I call it, the measurement that I use to design the pattern. So we are not going to talk about it too much, but we talk about the ease. I measure from the side of my neck down when I'm taking my measurement. So I like to call it high shoulder and to my full bust, and high upper bust is just, it was try and error that I found that about, sometimes I use 1.75, sometimes I use 2, but I just tried this year, the difference between the distance between the upper bust and the full bust is working for me so far. But it's just where I want the armhole to be. So you can just look in the mirror and see where you want the armhole to be, and determine the length from the higher shoulder down there, or from your apex to that area, and use it to determine your upper bust distance as well, or the distance between the two. So, and then I have my waist, and I like to, you know, cinch it in there to curve the fabric because I'm not putting that at the waist. I cinch it in there, and because I'm triangle shape, veering it down allow the my waist area to show up more than it is uh, curved in there, if that makes sense. When technically it's just 0.5 inches less than the upper bust, but veered more out. But so I like to, you know, mark that waist because I have belly. If I go from the waist to the hip, it tends to be too tight at my belly, and my waist is close to my upper bust. It's midpoint between my belly and the full bust. My waist is midpoint between the two. So therefore, having a belly, I'm 47, I have 3 kids. Having belly and having my waist higher up, for me, I like to put my belly button area on the pattern so that I can make sure I'm measuring my belly button circumferences and marking it on the pattern so that from my waist down, I make sure I'm going well past that point or to that point to give enough space for my belly so that the fabric does not cinch me too much at the belly button area, showing my belly. So, and then from there I can go to the curve, and you can even vary the pattern there as well. From the belly button I can go down, from the waist I can go straight to the hip, passing by connecting those two, waist and belly, and then go all the way down until I touch the hip circumference line. So it may not touch it exactly at the calculated point, it might be longer than that. So that will make it wider. Or once I reach the belly button and go in 1 inch lower, I can just go straight down. So I tend to use sometimes 1 inch above the hip circumference to hit and then go straight down so that I can create 90-degree angle between the side seam and the hip circumference. But yeah, but I know that I can create that triangle shape more or less playing with the waist and the belly button. Once I connect those two, I can go straight or I can continue my triangle line, you know, to go past the hip circumference point mark. So those are the measurements that I work with, and you can see that I'm a triangle shape. My chest is smaller and not much difference between that and my waist, but my hip is quite wide and my belly is bigger as well, so making me having a triangle shape and having my waist too close to my bust. There is no space there to pull a dart. So sewing for myself using my own measurement, there is now, I'm not adding excess fabric that I need to cinch it in. Where a dart will be useful will be between my full bust and my neckline. There is excess fabric there that I can capture within a dart. So later when I'm making that, it will be more on the upper side of my chest and the back of the outfit, but not so much between the waist, not so much around the waist area, because again, for people, if you have a full chest, your circumference at the bust area will be bigger than your waist, so that excess fabric, it makes sense to have it there to keep it in, to contain it in. But in my case where I'm more wider at the bottom, I need that excess fabric there, and I don't have enough space between my full bust and my waist to put a dot. So therefore, I wanted to learn to create pattern without that, without a waist dot, if that's how you would call it. And I found um, cutting the fabric in bias to drape the top, and pretty much, using this is what is working for me. But in this pattern though, I have a little bit of gap at the back, and the front neckline is so tight that I make a choker out of that tie. So I mean, it's like a necklace. I don't need a necklace for my neckline. That tie is already a necklace. But man, I think it's it could be choking me as well. So, or I can tie loosely. That would be a way. It went through my head, so that is okay. So I could wear it, but I think it would be good to, to um yeah, make a revision to this pattern, and we can see how the revision will turn out. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all your comments, and we thank you very much for watching our videos. Thank you very much for subscribing to our channel. I'm Afiabi Liberman, Curious of Liberman Consulting L.L.C YouTube channel, and in soap.com, our blog. On our channel and on our blog, we share different ways to save money and different ways to make money to reach your financial independence, where you do not depend on an employer to provide for your family. And sewing your own clothes is one way to save money. At least that's the goal. But at the same time, we are learning valuable skills. And I found sewing to be soothing for me. It's like a stress reliever. And in some way, is one way I keep myself busy. Is entertaining. It's one thing I can do without having a screen to entertain me. Different way you can keep yourself entertained. Sewing is one way I can keep myself entertained as well, and I can brainstorm because we are designing the pattern. There is a lot of thinking involved, and I found it enjoying as well. Being green and gold color personality, the first two color personality of mine, we all have 4 of them. Learning is something that is kind of strong in my personality type, and sharing what I learn is as well. So trying to see how we can improve this pattern, how we can design our own pattern is kind of fascinating. At the same time, we are learning a skill there. So, and I'm just trying to share my journey with you. If you are trying to design for yourself, or you like to design for yourself, if there are some tips you can, find useful to use in your journey, that'll be good. So thank you so much for your time. And again, we are using quilting cotton, and you can find pretty colors that you can work with. If you like colorful fabric, they have a variety. They gives you a variety of design and color fabric to work with. So we are using those. They are affordable. They fade over time, but again, that gives you more option to sew more, right? But in the meantime, yeah, that's what we are doing. And I'm not buying pattern. I'm just using a lot of paper, pattern over pattern. But those paper, we tend to use them to like a scrap paper as well. And next time I'm buying paper, I'll be buying a white color. This brown is not easy for me to show you the pattern design on it. So thank you so much for your time. Happy sewing. By the way, are you trying to sew for yourself? Are you a beginner sewer? And are you designing a pattern for yourself, or are you buying pattern? Buying pattern to sew for yourself, there is a skill in that as well, because a lot of time you have to customize the pattern to fit you before you carry, and I'm not even sure I know how to do that. There is a terminology for it, and there is a skill there as well. I just decide that, each time there is something that I can learn, I like to go that route. It's the longer route, but it's fulfilling. At the end of the day, I enjoy the journey, and I'm now waiting for the end result to enjoy it. I'm enjoying the process. And I think we should make a tagline for it. Life is about journey, not the end. So let's enjoy the process. Let's enjoy the journey. And yeah, not just wait to enjoy the end, but let's make the journey enjoyable. But I think is more a process type personality type things. So if you are not that type of person, that's fine. You are valuable. We all have different abilities, different talent. That's what make all of us needing each other. As for me, being green and gold color personality, the first highest color personality, and blue and orange being the last two, I tend to enjoy the process. So therefore, that's why I don't buy pattern to sew, but I want to create my own pattern because I know it becomes a puzzle that I can, you know, create multiple variations from, and I can save money and I can learn valuable skills from it as well, while I'm brain is a lab. My sewing is a lab, just like my cooking is a lab for me. Yeah, so thank you so much, and sorry for the rambling, but yeah, thank you. And it'll be great if you can share your journey with us as well in the comment section of this video. Yeah, if you sew using your own pattern, if you sew using your own outfit that you like to duplicate, or if you sew buying pattern, each one of those ways involve a lot of skills. And so far, designing my own pattern is the skills that I'm working on. So thank you so much for watching our videos.